And just, you didn't call Mr. Berner, but we invited Mr. Berner and Ms. Kay because of the details involved with state tax applications.
I've got it under also present.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. But they are official invitees. Any additions or questions about the minutes from last meeting? Changes?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to note for the record that I thought that the clerk's summary of the discussion that ensued was very thorough and comprehensive.
I would second that as well.
I agree. I need to relook again. I think I found a typo. I'll show you if that's the case.
Okay, with no further additions, changes, fixing the typos, we'll consider those approved. Citizen comments on any agenda items. Thank you, Donna. So old business, this is really the only business we have today. It's the review and state tax applications from last time, a continuing discussion. And I hope, given the migration, that everybody got my email with the summaries and comments. If you did not, I can forward those to you, but you got those.
Got that.
Mr. Spencer. Mr. Belt, did you get those?
Yes, I did, sir.
Okay, good. And I know Mr. Berner.
The clerk's waving her hand, though.
I will send those to you, Patrick, my mistake. Did I send them to you? I think I was fighting with the migration issues as I was trying to get this. Sorry, I'll get those to you.
It's all right. I just like to put them in my
Yes, ma'am.
file.
Okay, so my approach today I'd like to go through, maybe the best way is to go through either that document or we can go through the normal document, whichever you prefer. Or just go down the list and have discussions. I'd like to do two things. One is to do each one of these individually. And then in my note to all of you, I'd like to stay with two options. One is we approve the committee's recommendation, or we approve the recommendation from the chairman's comments. I would not like to move into a direction where we all agreed to suggest a new one, so I don't think that's really the appropriate procedure at this point. So I think we have one of two choices. Decline, accept the committee's recommendation, or accept the chairman's comments and recommendations.
That was aligned with my thinking that we don't need to redo everybody's homework, and you did a great summary that I thought helped, so.
Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Berner, and Mr. Belt?
It is. I'm not looking to redo anything. I just wanted to make a point for next time, or a thought that I had. I saw under the town of Kiowa proposed budget allocations, we did not have anything for Island Beach services. I thought they would be something that would qualify. I'm not looking at adding it now, but I'm thinking for next year. And I would like to know if there is a reason why they wouldn't be considered.
Well, they didn't apply is number one,
Oh, that's a good reason.
so they have to apply, and then we can determine whether they're eligible or not, and then determine on that, if they are eligible, the merits of their request.
Well, but CCO didn't apply, or maybe they did.
CCO normally don't apply, the town applies.
I know, that's what I was saying, because this is under the town of Kiowa proposed budget allocations, and then this Island Beach services, wouldn't that be included under that?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might, with regard to your proposed resolution or handling of these issues, I'm probably fine with that. I would kind of come out in the middle or slightly differently on two or three of them, but that doesn't mean we can't go with one of the two. I will respectfully disagree with you on at least one of your chairman's recommendations. But just back up and address the question that's being posed by Councilmember Berner. And I'm wondering if it also warrants having, while we're all here, a discussion about some of the broader issues. You've outlined or touched upon a couple of them in your summary email.
Yes.
But one of which I think would directly relate to Island Beach Services is whether it would be an appropriate public purpose to allocate public funds to a for-profit entity solely to enhance their profitability. And I think that's one of the issues. We don't have counsel here with us. I've posed that question, haven't gotten an answer yet. I would note that we have in the past allocated monies to for-profit entities. This town appears to be unique in doing that relative to, I think, every single other municipality that we've looked at. Haven't looked at every single one in South Carolina, but a dozen or so allocate only to nonprofit entities. There is a recent, fairly recent, 4 or 5 years old, State Attorney General's opinion that says that there is no prohibition in the state accommodations tax statute itself on allocating funds to for-profit entities. It doesn't specify nonprofit or for-profit, and that's right. You don't find a specific prohibition, but there's always the general constitutional statutory admonition that public money can only be used for a public purpose. Now, what constitutes a public purpose is a matter of facts and circumstances. And so that's one of the issues which arises for me with regard to allocations to like the property management companies.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're going to use that definition, which I understand, I'm not arguing it, my only comment is then a lot of these recipients, if you will, would not qualify then next year.
Well, and so the issue is what constitutes a public purpose. There is a fair amount of case law that indicates that you can have an incidental private benefit. There can be a private benefit to the allocation of public monies that can still have a public purpose, but it has to have primarily a public purpose. In the context of state allocation funds, I'm aware of one case, or may have been a revenue ruling, that, for example, found a proper allocation of state accommodations tax dollars to protect the facade of a privately owned building in a historic district. And it said there were public benefits because it was in historic district, even though it was a privately owned facility.
Well, I didn't mean to go down this rabbit hole.
Well, no, but it's one that I wanted to go down as well and just tee up. I'm not sure we're in a position to kind of resolve this year. We've allocated as we have in the past. That's never been challenged by the Tax Expenditure Review Committee, TURC. There has been, again, there's been no public challenge, no TURC challenge of that, but it's an issue that is out there, and anytime you have a for-profit entity applying for state tax funds, then you have to ask the question, what is the public purpose versus the private benefit? And
Okay, so I'm not ready to go down that rabbit hole with you. I wasn't prepared for that sidebar or side issue. But I just wanted to go back to Island Beach Services. I see it as somewhat analogous to our beach patrol contract. And you said before that it's you didn't want to spend money for a profit organization. I understand that. But we're getting money back for arts and cultural events, trash pickup, beach patrol, and I see Island Beach Services, the money is not necessarily going into their pocket, it's going into paying our budget cost.
No, not Island Beach Services.
No, I think that's.
That's a franchise agreement.
No, I understand that, but you have Beach Patrol
So Beach
contract.
Patrol, as you recall, so Beach Patrol, Berry Island Ocean Rescue, Beach Patrol, CCSO, we actually have a contract, so the town is paying for that service.
Right.
So our state ATEX application is the town's application. Berry Island Beach Services, we're not paying for that contract. So they have just a franchise agreement with the town, but we're not paying for the contract.
Understood.
Therefore, we
Now I
don't have
understand.
So
Okay.
therefore, we don't have an application in. So for those 4 applications that you're referring to.
So we don't have a budget line item for Island
We
Beach?
have a revenue.
We have
but not a
revenue items.
budget.
We collect,
not-
we
right,
collect
but not-
$300,000
not
or
an
so in
expense.
the revenues.
Right, that's correct.
Got it.
And
I
so
understand
those
now.
3 applications is actually a town application.
I understand now.
And,
Okay.
and also the CCSO and Beach Patrol would fit under the kind of public health and safety exception. That Island Beach Services doesn't have anything to do with public health and safety, public health, safety, and welfare. CCSO and Beach Patrol do.
Okay, all right, well, to cut this off, so at some point in the future, we'll have to have a special meeting just to discuss this.
And just to maybe put a bow on this discussion, hopefully, a lot of my preface for notes for you guys was to let you know that I have brought this up in December with the committee and with the mayor about what other locales are doing, what we're doing, what our philosophy is, how we should allocate this money. It does bother me a little bit that we're allocating money to for-profit entities. My approach has been, let's talk about it with the committee, have them digest it, and have them lead the charge on changing this. And if they don't, and we feel we need to, then we can do that. But if it comes from the committee, I feel like that's a stronger statement of how we're supposed to allocate these monies.
Yeah, that's where it should start.
So I would like for them to come to the conclusion, this is how we should change it or tweak it or modify it. This should be their philosophy. So they have ownership with it rather than us dictating the rules.
that
Although we
makes-
can do that.
That makes sense.
So
I don't
that's
have-
just, it's more of a stylistic approach that I've had 3 years, is involvement of everybody. And I think that's the approach I'd like to take. But we've been digesting this for about 6 months now. So I hope that to the extent we have a meeting in October, November, we will have before council a change to our charter that says, here's our philosophy and our approach. And we'll memorialize that in a charter so it goes forward after that.
All right, look
Whatever
forward
that
to
can
that.
be. And again, it's not charter's a living document, so we might get part way, and then next year we might get further down the road. But we're on that path of being explicit about what we're doing versus what others are doing, and are we okay with that? With public funds for public purposes.
Right. All right, I have one final mathematical question, which I hope isn't creating,
No, that's good.
and that's because I'm not part of this committee all the time. So I'm wondering how, in the procedure, it says the amount of the expenditure must be based on the estimated percentage of costs attributable to tourists. Using the first item, Mr. Chairman, that you provided in your email yesterday, I don't know how that's done, and I'm only bringing it up so we can be transparent about all this.
I don't understand your premise.
I don't know how you
Where
calculated.
are you coming with this attributable to tourists? What is
Well,
that?
that's in this book here, Policy on Interpretation of Tourism-Related Expenditures. That's, let me get to the math. Acres Ellis, okay, they had an application request of 156,000. The votes, according to your log here, there were 6 out of 6 in voting to approve Acres Ellis's request.
Correct.
But the recommended award, and then it says paren simple average, close paren, adds up to only 120,800. So I'm looking for that mathematical.
Okay. This is the historical thing we're taking into consideration. The direct answer to your question is, let's make it simple. Everybody said, we're not voting for 156,000. They don't need that much money. We're only going to give them 120. All 6 people voted for that. That's the way that can happen. They don't have to allocate all the monies. The other way it could happen is 5 could vote for 156 and 1 vote for 0. And they take 556 plus 1 0 divided by 6 gets reduced amount.
Okay,
That's the simple average, the way that it's historically done.
okay, I hear everything you're saying. Do we have a transparent log of how that's done in case somebody challenges?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
In fact,
Now, a legitimate question is, does that make any rational sense whatsoever from legal or policy matter. And I think that would be a fair question, and
asked it.
because it invites the
Abuse.
well, I won't
Yeah.
want to use that term, but for example, it encourages somebody to come in the way that's worked in the past with a really, really high request. One person supports it at some level, and all of a sudden it ends up with something.
Right.
And I think, again, that's how we've always done it in the past. I just didn't quite understand if that's how the formula worked this time. I think the chairman was a little surprised as well to kind of unwind this time. Maybe a bridge too far, but that's
Oh,
definitely
yeah, I wasn't
something we-
suggesting to do it. I was just looking for clarification
But
because I didn't see
again,
the
it's
math.
sort of buried in the message of my note is, I mentioned in there a majority vote, a majority rule vote, so that no one person can do that.
Yes.
So as we think about procedures going forward, again, our philosophy is, I would expect this is going to happen, that a majority of the participants have to vote, the committee members have to vote for something for it to be put forward to us. If 1 out of 7 vote for it,
Doesn't make it.
doesn't make it, regardless of what they allocate.
Right, right.
Well,
That's gonna be the approach I'm gonna push forward, because it does, that invites the stuff we're talking about.
Well, I just want to clarify one thing, Mr. Chairman, that still would not preclude the council from saying, notwithstanding the recommendation of no monies being allocated by the state tax committee, the council comes to a different conclusion.
We could.
Yes.
I'll stop there.
Yes, I
We
mean,
could.
yes, it's ultimately, it's an advisory.
That's correct.
It's advisory, it's a recommendation.
I'm
and
worried
it's not
about the
binding.
other side. I'm
Yes,
not
I
worried
get
about-
it, I get,
Yeah.
I mean, I get that.
Because they're supposed to recommend to us, we can then do
Yep.
what we'd like to do within the context of the law. But if as an advisory committee, they need to be some kind of consensus before putting it to us.
I understand. What you
That's
just,
part of the math too that we want to change.
I
That was the same
understand.
question I
Thanks.
asked on the email yesterday. Yeah,
You and Mr. Spencer are totally aligned.
yeah,
Far ends of the table.
right, we're counterbalancing.
And I just want to kind of reiterate, again, for the record, that a couple of other certain ways in which the town has been somewhat anomalous relative to other communities in how we've allocated dollars. In addition to the fact that other communities allocate only to nonprofit organizations. Most other communities have historically utilized the vast majority of state accommodations tax dollars for municipal-related projects and purposes. An example is Isle of Palms. It's not the only example, but it's the one that's closest to us. So the Isle of Palms generates a little bit more in state accommodations tax revenues than we do. Probably, we're a little north of 3 million, they're about 3.5, 3.6 or something like that.
Yep.
They allocate out of all of that only $50,000 to outside organizations. All the rest they use for beach renourishment, other municipal-related projects that fit within the statutory criteria. But the other thing is, way in which we are anomalous is, at least heretofore, this year's a little bit different, is we've struggled to allocate all the monies. That is not an issue for most other municipalities.
Well, that'll
We
get
haven't had that
worse.
as many claimants on state accommodations tax dollars.
But if we're gonna, we're touching the boundary of that rabbit hole again, but if we're just gonna do nonprofits, we're gonna not be able to spend.
Well,
all the money
unless it's
either.
all municipal organizations. The other anomaly is that, and again, it relates to kind of nonprofits and who are the potential claimants on these tax revenues, is that, where was I going with this one?
Co-contribution or the size.
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean, yeah, you're
allocation.
absolutely right, that there are very specific criteria, fairly rigorous criteria, that are the municipalities impose to make clear that the purpose of the allocation is to attract tourists. That is not a statutory requirement. It's either attract or provide for or facilitate tourists. And as a policy matter, as I raised at the state tax meeting, which we were starting down this path of revisiting all of this, is we as policymakers are kind of in the position of determining, do we want to, can we afford to, from an infrastructure and amenities support and actually attract more tourists? Or are we kind of maxed out on the number of tourists we attract, at least in peak season, and the focus and emphasis should be on increasing the average daily rate, the daily spend, enhancing their visitor experience while they're here?
And the shoulder seasons.
Yeah, shoulder seasons, there's maybe a little bit more room for that. But in peak season, we're kind of at capacity from an island standpoint. The idea of increasing the number of tourists.
Well, it won't happen. Obviously, if you're at the peak, you're not gonna be able to increase it.
Well, but if we're allocating money to saying the only way you get money is if you can generate more tourists coming to Kiowa Island, we may not want that to be the policy objective.
Well, it would be what, as Mr. Chairman just said, it'd be during the shoulder or non-peak seasons.
So I mean, there's a whole host of things we're working on affecting a better model going forward. And the mayor brings up a bunch of good points. And one of the things that, again, what other locales are doing that we're thinking about, so it's the nonprofit issue. They all have limits, significantly smaller limits, like $50,000 or $100,000 in total. Or there's one that has per organization. They are certainly to meet the requirements. Some have co-contribution models where we'll give you $25,000 if you put up $25,000. And there's one other big one that I'm forgetting. But there's a lot of things that we don't have as rigorous requirements as some of the other locales do. And we're going to look at all of these things and make sure that not only are we following the statutory guidelines, but we have a philosophy that the town would approve of. We all would approve of, and it makes sense for managing tourism, not just increasing. And the mayor's right. We can, in the summer seasons, we can have projects that increase the contribution, and in the shoulder seasons, we can have projects that increase the attendance when attendance is not 100%. And the two last things I'll say is, and let me just read from the statute. So, what we're able to do is when they define tourist-related expenditures to include advertising and promotion of tourism so as to develop and increase tourist attendance through the generation of publicity. So it's very broad, but there's some specific things in there that we need to think about when we're doing the allocations.
But I would also note that of the 8 other than workforce housing, the 8 enumerated defined permissible tourism-related expenditures, that is the only one that actually speaks to increasing
Correct.
tourism.
And the rest of them are, I mean, just to go through them again, so for the record, promotion of arts and cultural events is possible. Construction, maintenance, operation of facilities for civic and cultural activities, and I'm going to go with that. Criminal justice system, law enforcement, solid waste, and health facilities for tourists and tourist facilities. And this is based on the estimated cost directly attributable to tourists. Public facilities such as restrooms, dressing rooms, parks, and parking lots we can spend money on. Tourist shuttles. And this is an important one because we're going to talk about this one. Control and repair of waterfront erosion, including beach renourishment.
Right.
So the beach renourishment project that the town is spending money on is specifically enumerated.
Yeah, I know, I knew that.
You can see where it's tangentially related to tourism, but that's a specific one. And then operating visitor information centers, which we do here.
Correct.
So there's some others, but those are the ones that really affect what we're talking about, both today and going forward.
All right. Thank you for entertaining my questions.
We've gone down the rabbit hole now.
We more than covered what my comments were going to be, so thanks.
Okay, so do we want to now move through this? Can't find my own. Here we go. Okay. So the first one on the list is Akers Ellis. Again, the executive summary is, this is rentals, advertising, and marketing. It's monies for website, email campaigns, social media, search, third-party booking platforms like VRBO, and other print and digital advertising. It received 6 out of 6 votes from the committee. The request was $156,000. The committee recommended $121,000 approximately by their vote. My comments were, this is a for-profit entity. It has activities directly in the town of Kiowa. It's clear their activities are in support of tourism on Kiowa. The funds requested are general expenses and not for a specific event. That was the one thing that I left off. Again, all 6 voted in favor of some allocation. This is a returning applicant who we funded in the past, and this request is consistent with our current policies and statutory requirements. And my recommendation was to approve basically the committee's recommendation at $121,000. So I think I need a motion here.
I don't think I can do that or vote. Am I allowed to vote in this or, because I didn't think so. All right, so I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this?
And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, you said 121,000, but you want 120,800.
I think they can pick 128 or 100. I just rounded it to be simple with the numbers, but they can pick either one. And we can decide at the conclusion what to approve. Any discussion, or do you want to talk about the amount, or any issues with this?
Mr. Chairman, with regard to this one, I would just note that while I will support, I'm not sure that either the chairman's mark or the committee's recommendation, $200 difference, it is with some reservation, given both the issues that we've discussed before about whether this is truly appropriate public purpose, and also whether kind of the math works to support this particular request relative to others. But having said that, in this particular instance, I will defer to the committees and your recommendation.
And again, I made this comment in all of my recommendations, that this is consistent with current policies or historical approaches. And we don't have anything in front of us today that would change how historically we've done it. So since it meets current or historical policies and statutory requirements, that it does promote tourism and increase attendance through the generation of publicity, that's why I was okay with it as well.
Yeah, you clearly said everything that you're nominating or recommending is based on historic way the town has done business. So I don't see the contradiction myself.
As a general rule, I tend to defer to the chairman's recommendations, only because I know you and the committee have spent a ton of time on this, and me sticking my screwdriver in and trying to ratchet it is not going to be worthwhile, I don't think. So unless there's one that I've got heartburn with, that's generally where I'm coming from.
And just to be clear, what I did was basically, I like round numbers, so I rounded them generally up. There's 1 or 2 that I rounded down, and all of them are still less than the applicant's request. So it wasn't
Yeah, I noticed.
really adding any real value.
That's the engineer in you.
Deal with big numbers, sometimes they get simpler with a lot of zeros rather than
Those are not
decimal
imaginary
places.
numbers.
So we have a recommendation. Would somebody like to edit it with a number? Pick one of the 2. Somebody, please.
Go with your 121.
So we have a motion to approve Akers Ellis funding for state tax at $121,000.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Akers Ellis is funded. The next organization is Andel Inn. It's a very similar request to Akers Ellis. There's like 3 of these that are very similar. They're for destination advertising and marketing as well. Again, monies are spent for search engines, website, email campaigns, social media, vanity site, and other print and digital advertising, promoting events and activities related to Kiowa Andel Inn, and Fresh Fields. This also received 6 out of 6 votes. The applicant was $295. The recommended award was $247. My comments, again, this is a for-profit entity. Its activities directly on Kiowa Island, or in Kiowa, the town of Kiowa. It is clear that their activities in support of tourism on Kiowa. The funds are requested for general, not for a specific event. And that's a negative, by the way, in case it wasn't clear last time. Specific events are far easier to see the benefit, but it's for general funds. So it's not for a specific event, project, or program. Again, all 6 members voted for this. And again, I apologize. We have 7 members on the committee. 1 was absent, so 6 was the full committee at this last meeting.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, and if you can just also let them know, I think the reason why 6, because the actual applicant abstained, Don, so his vote.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. In all these cases, if the applicant is a member of the committee, they abstained. So this request, this is a returning applicant, who we funded and passed, and this request is consistent with current and historical policies and statutory requirements. So my recommendation was to follow the committee and fund it $247,000 for this year.
So I move that we approve the committee and chairman's recommendation to fund at $247,000.
Second?
Discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is one that I'm going to probably have to vote no on, just as to the amount in this particular case. Not that, given the fact we're allocating to Acres Ellis, the resort, and ESPN some other amount. I'm having difficulty justifying kind of the math associated with this request relative to the resort, ESPN, and Acres Ellis. We have 1,300 short-term rentals, more than 1,300 short-term rentals on the island, which are the principal source of tourist accommodations on the island. Andel Inn, pretty important, it's one of 2 hotels, but it has about 100 rooms. If you assume it generates this additional advertising, increases occupancy by 10%. If I'm doing my math correctly, that would work out to about a $40,000 increase in accommodation tax revenue.
Okay,
But
okay,
we're
I'm with you.
allocating $295,000.
$247.
$247,000. And again, relative to the short-term rental request, which are many, 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 many more rooms. There are 4,000 rooms through short-term rental properties relative to the 100 rooms. I would also distinguish it from the resort, because the resort is just not just the sanctuary. It is also the 5 golf courses. It's also the Roy Barth Tent Center, Night Heron Park, et cetera, et cetera. I cannot rationalize the funding request relative to the other requesters.
Would you have a number in mind?
I do not, because I didn't think we were going down that path. But I mean, I'd certainly, it's just hard to figure out how. Again, I don't know what their request was. I mean, ESPN only requested $35,000. It doesn't look like Harrington requested anything. Acres Ellis requested $156,000.
I guess continuing to think about that, the Andel is associated with Fresh Fields, which is part of their justification. And there is a 3 Edens requests in here as well for significant funding. I'm not sure if that's a pro or a con, to be honest, but.
So what they,
The point I've made is the issue is not just so much for-profit entities. The distinction I've made between, in my own mind anyway, between the resort and Andel Inn, as well as any short-term rental properties, is that one does not come to Kiowa Island because they want to stay at the Andel Inn or stay at a particular short-term rental property. They decide they want to come to Kiowa Island for any number of different reasons. And then they figure out what's available and what's affordable, what's at a price point. So we need accommodations in order to accommodate the tourist, but that's not the reason they come. I would distinguish the resort in that regard. There are some people that want to come to Kiowa because of the Kiowa Island Golf Resort, because either they want to stay at a 5-star hotel, or they want to play the ocean course, or they want to, go to the #1 rated resort tennis facility in the country. Those are reasons to actually come, not all the other benefits, the beach, et cetera, that Kiowa has. So I struggle with all of these. I struggle with this one the most, and it's not, again, at the end of the day, if we're allocating to the others, that's fine, because we're going down that path. It's just the amount relative to the others and relative to the amount of accommodations tax revenues it could potentially generate.
I guess I'm
So-
the exception to your rule because we came for several years and only stayed at the Andel Inn and went to Beachwalker Park. So there are people that do that.
So, Mr. Mayor, to help ease your concern, I understand where you're coming from. I'm like a rules and regulations guy. So referring to, again, this is in the policy for interpretation of tourism-related expenditures, that's in the SATEX book. It says there's a test, although I'm not reading from ruling 98-22, it says the test is that the expenditure must be used to attract or provide for tourists. So Andel Inn would be providing for the tourists, and that sounds then to me that would then be appropriate.
You are absolutely right as providing for. Again, its question is, public toilets are providing for, roads getting to tourist facilities is providing for, civic and cultural considering providing for, the extra beach patrol and CCSO is also providing for. Those are all, most of those are public expenditures, so it easily meets the public purpose test in addition to meeting the statutory requirement of either attracting or providing for. It still gets to the issue, which I raised before, as to whether or not this is merely enhancing the bottom line of a for-profit.
Well, it clearly is, but I'm ignoring that test because we agreed to do that next year.
Yes. And as am I. I'm not saying no dollars at all. Just on my calculus in looking at this is the request relative to.
I understand, but I just wanted to let you know that it is for providing for tourists according to the revenue, the internal revenue ruling, so that would make it applicable, I think.
So the one subtlety there, Mr. Berner, is this is an interpretation by Mr. Maybank, who is head of the, what's the name of the committee? The committee that approves.
No,
our
this
state-
is 9820. Is this 9820? Are you reading from
Yes.
9820?
Well-
That's the treasurer's office interpretation. It does not constitute law. It's a regulatory interpretation of the language of the
All right,
statute.
but
It does give, you do give weight to that. It's not dispositive, but you give weight
just
to
to
it.
know, the ruling that I'm reading from says it's italicized, which to me means it's a quote. I'm hoping that protocol is being followed. It says italicized to attract or provide for tourists. So I'm thinking that is a direct quote from the ruling.
It is, but it does not, it's not specific to a particular type of facility. I posed the question, but and I haven't gotten an answer back yet. But I know, for example, the CVB, which gets the bulk of the dollars, does not provide any advertising support for any single hotel property. I don't believe, for example,
All
the
right.
city of Charleston, as an example,
I was just
provides
bringing
any
this up to
funding
eat-
support for any hotel.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
ease your consternation. That's all I was.
No,
I wasn't arguing.
again, I'm kind of, we're putting aside, at least I am now, those issues.
Yes.
I'm simply the math on the allocation relative to the contribution to accommodations tax revenues and to other
Yeah, it's
requesters.
relatively too high.
Yeah, that's all.
That makes sense too.
That's all.
So I guess back to the chairman's question of, up with a number.
If you want to recommend a number, I will take recommendations for a number. I will say, I have the same, there are committee members, and I'm a committee member, but not a voting member. I have the same issue because the breakdown we get, which is in the package, is Google paid media, campaign search, Sojourn platform, and digital campaign, Media Plus, vanity site, social media, and media content refresh. Some of that seems like normal operating costs to run a hotel, and some of it is probably focused on directly attracting folks to Kiowa. So I do struggle with that myself, Mr. Mayor. I just wasn't planning today to make any changes other than, did it follow or did it not follow?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
what was the vote?
again, you kind of do the math, a 10% increase in occupancy rate, which would be pretty high. I mean, if you actually generated 10% at, that's 10 rooms, because it's a 100-room property at an average daily rate of, I don't know what the Andel Inn, on the island as a whole, for rental properties, it's $500. And it's
About the same at the
Or
Andel.
$500. So, and you kind of do the math, that would potentially generate an additional net revenues of over, 1.2, 1.3, $1.4 million in gross revenues to the Andel Inn, which is good for the Andel Inn. You're not increasing the number of tourists by that many. It's 10 per day. But the accommodations tax revenue impact, like I said, the 3% would be a fraction of that. It'd be $40,000 over the course of the year, but we're allocating $295,000 to get back $40,000 in accommodations tax revenue.
Well, that would be just the increase, that would be the total accommodation tax, right?
No, you're right. That would be, yes, the increase if you were successful in increasing occupancy.
What you're not considering is the monies they spend outside of the hotel.
Absolutely, and hospitality taxes, et cetera, no question.
restaurants,
There
clubbing.
there is a broader economic impact, no question about that.
They're going to 48 and Littell and everything else. And I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure this is a P&L exercise, though, as far as generating accommodations taxes. I mean, there's not necessarily a requirement that we're increasing more accommodations taxes by spending accommodations taxes.
And nor am I suggesting that it be a requirement. I'm really not, because you could look at each one of these, how much actual additional revenue does it, that is not. For me, it's simply a comparison to the other accommodations providers. That's all.
And let me say one thing about the additional revenue, is everybody claims the additional revenue. So Acres Ellis claims it, Andel Inn claims it, Eden's claims it because of the events they host. The resort claims it because they're drawing people and they have to eat out someplace. So everybody claims that additional revenue. So you almost have to ring circle, what are they providing? Because everybody's contributing to that, and Eden specifically for Freshfields is contributing to that as well. So it's some fuzzy math that you have to do in your head to say, what are they really contributing beyond their specific revenue from their hotel or their restaurant or whatever the case might be.
So, I mean, and this is spitballing, but, I mean, we just approved 121,000 for Acres Ellis. Is that a reasonable commensurate amount for Andel Inn to cover similar kinds of expenses that are in the application?
Well, it's only $180,000 more than the resort. So some number in that range, 120 to 150, seems to be relative to the resort and the others more reasonable. But I'm not, this is not one, I just say, this is my own personal view, and if, I have no issue if the remainder of the committee has a different view on this. Because we'll deal with all of these going.
So the non-specificity of what they're really spending it on, and I agree, it sounds more like general operating expenses. If you're comfortable with the 150, I think that's a number that would be reasonable as well, since they didn't call out specific events, specific expenses. And it seems like it's supporting general activities as opposed to.
It's not a specific event. I'm happy for you to make a motion to edit the number.
I would then amend the motion to accept the chairman's recommendation to modify the amount from $295,000 to $150,000.
$247,000.
$247,000 to, yes, $150,000.
Second.
All all in favor of the modification to the amendment?
Aye.
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 So we now,
Any other discussion on,
the underlying motion.
any other discussion on Andel N's request? All in favor of approving Andel N's recommendation at $150,000?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Andel N, 150, approved. Thank you. Okay, Barrier Island Little League. The application request was for $100,000. The executive summary is this Maybank Fields renovation and upgrade project this is a request to provide funds to upgrade and renovate 3 baseball fields and buildings, upgrade seating, shade structures, and concession areas. The vote was 1 of 6 for this applicant. The recommended award, the math came to a little over $8,000. The chairman's comments were, the applicant, while a good cause, does not meet the statutory burden for program inclusion in the chairman's opinion. This is a new applicant and might be a better candidate for a Kiowa charitable allocation. And so the chairman's recommendation was to decline with no funding for this applicant.
Mr. Chairman, I move accepting the chairman's recommendation.
Second.
Any other discussion?
This is one for which, for better for worse, and I understand it's for worse for Barrier Island Little League, is I can find no basis by which this fits within the statutory criteria. As broadly as one might look at the statutory criteria. The general one is all the specific tourism-related expenditures. It just doesn't get there. So I actually don't think this is a statutorily permitted expenditure.
That's what the chairman thought as well. I would agree. Again, this is a great cause. The purpose of SATAX is not to fund great causes. It has specific statutory and philosophical approaches. And so I'm aligned with you. I think this is, while a great cause, due both to the proximity and the statutory issues, does not meet it. So I'm not in favor of funding it as well. Any other discussion?
No, clear as a bell.
All in favor of declining this allocation?
Aye.
Aye. So no funding for Barrier Island. ESPM, vacation rentals, the applicant requested $35,000. The executive summary, again, this is like the 2 previous, Acres Ellis and LN. Vacation rentals and marketing to fund primarily the use of Google search engine to target vacationers for Kiowa Island. They were very specific about that in their application and their discussion. They also use QC Exclusives. This is a Charlotte, North Carolina-based magazine for both print and digital to advertise for vacationing more broadly in the Carolinas, but they did feature Kiowa as well in that. This received 5 out of 6 votes. The arithmetic average of the votes brought it to, instead of 35, to just under $22,000, $21,833. Chairman's comments were, this is a for-profit entity with activity direct, so that's sort of a negative, with activity directly in the town of Kiowa, that's a positive. The activity is in support of tourism on Kiowa, strong positive. Funds requested are for general use, not a specific event. 5 of the 6 members voted in support of this, and it is a returning applicant. This request is consistent with current policies and the historical approach, and it does meet the statutory requirements. So the chairman was supportive in approving at the level of the rounded number of $22,000.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the chairman's recommendation.
Second.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, again, I will simply, for the record, note that I will support this with the reservations and qualifications I've expressed with regard to both Acres Ellis and LN previously, and think this is something we need to look at going forward, but in this context, I will support it.
No other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
At $22,000?
Aye.
Aye. ESPM is funded at $22,000. Freshfields Village Edens. This is one of 3 applications, and I'm just going to summarize the 3 applications so I give you some context. This one is for events promotion and it's, this is for a specific event. The second one is going to be events promotion. This is the Gun and Gardens specific event. And the third one is for destination marketing, so it's much like the first two. Or sorry, it's much like Acres Ellis, ESPM, and LN. It's for broad internet marketing activity. So the first one, the application is for $35,000. It's events promotion, provide complimentary events on the Village Green for the benefit of tourists and visitors scheduled during peak seasons and holidays, such as the Art Walk, Sip and Shop, Movie Night on the Green, Farmers Market, Santa and holiday events. So several different events. This received 6 out of 6 votes. It was a full allocation at $35,000 from the committee. And the chairman's comments were, again, this is a for-profit entity, but it's activity directly in the town of Kiowa. It's clearly in support of tourism. Its use is for a specific event, and all 6 committee members voted for this. This is a returning applicant, and this request is consistent with policies and statutory requirements. So the chairman recommended approval at the committee's level of $35,000 for this. And again, just commentary in large part, the chairman likes things that are for specific events where you can draw a ring circle around the cost and purely understand them. And this is always on a reimbursement basis is the way these things are funded. So do I have a motion?
Chairman, I move the approval of the committees and chairman's joint recommendation of $35,000.
Second.
Any discussion?
I've got, maybe not directly relevant to this, but considering the amount of 3 of these, it would sure be nice to see Eden spend some of this money on filling the vacant space where King Street has been. I think that would help promote tourism. And I'm not sure it's appropriate to put a hook on this, but I think that would serve the community well for them to put in another affordable dining option. And we're looking north of $300,000 in allocations for them. And we've had an empty space going on for a year.
Thank you. Any other comments?
This one fits kind of squarely within the statutory criteria, so I'm supportive of the chairman's and committee's recommendation.
Okay, all in favor of approving 1 of 3 for Edens for the events promotion at $35,000?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Number 1 is approved. Number 2 is, again, an event. It's the Garden and Gun event. This request is for 2 events. They've historically only had one for the fall and one for the spring. They're both in shoulder seasons, which is important. It's free to the public. The funds are used to provide setup and takedown, digital and print advertising in Gun and Garden magazine, and for the cost of entertainment. They did provide a pretty explicit budget for this, for these 2 events. The applicant requested a little over $211,000. The committee recommended a little over $208,000. The chairman's comments were, this is a for-profit entity, but it provides activity directly in the town of Kiowa. It clearly supports tourism on Kiowa. These are very popular events, and the funds are used for clear purposes, specific purposes, and the cost accounting is clear and specific. All 6 members of the committee were supportive. This is a returning applicant, and this request is consistent with current policies and statutory requirements. So the chairman's recommendation was to approve at $211,000, effectively their request.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the chairman's recommendation at $211,000.
Second.
Further discussion?
I'm just curious, so this is an example of what would not be funded next year, you think?
I would say this would be, because it's a specific event.
Even though it was for profit?
Well, they don't generate any profit from it. This is just paying for their event. Now, Eden's, this is I think this is the perfect way to do this. They got a ring circle event. People come and stay in the hotels. They spend money in Fresh Fields. So it's, the event doesn't generate any profitability, but the attendance at the event generates profitability for all of their stores.
Okay, all right,
So I personally
I was
am-
curious,
like this
okay.
type of event.
Well, and I would note, if we limited, like other communities, to only nonprofit organizations being eligible to apply, which we could do as a policy matter, then this would not be eligible. We would struggle to figure out how to allocate $3 million. I mean, even if we could come up with unless we had a massively expensive beach renourishment project, how to utilize it for municipal purposes, because there just aren't as many nonprofits that are involved in tourism facilitation or tourism traction. This one, I would note, in contrast to many of the others, not just provides for an activity for tourists while they're here. This is one that actually
Draws folks in.
draws people
Yep.
from around, because there are people around the country that love to go to the Garden and Gun events.
Yeah, and Mr. Berner, I'm not sure how far I should go down this rabbit hole, but this is a type of thing where the town could sponsor the event and contract with Edens to provide it. And we could say, this is our event, but it be a garden and gun event that they just happen to provide because the funds are ring circled. And then it gets away from, it's a for-profit entity holding it. So they could form a nonprofit to sponsor events in Freshfields. And a nonprofit, their only goal was to do things like this.
All right,
So because it's ring circled, I'm less concerned about this affecting their profitability.
So that's helpful, so I can understand where you're going forward for next year. That's
Okay. Any other discussion on this one? So this is to approve $211,000 for Freshfield Edens for the sponsor of 2 garden gun events. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's approved at 211 for Edens. The third one for Edens, this is a request for $65,000. This is back to more like Andel Inn, Acres Ellis, ESPM, and the like. This is tourist and marketing advertising. It's destination marketing for Freshfields Village as a destination and a weekend getaway, using both digital and print media. The committee voted 6 out of 6 for this. The request was for 65. The committee approved 62. The chairman's comments were, this is a for-profit entity, does provide activity directly in the town of Kiowa. Clearly, the activity is in support of tourism. However, this request is for general advertising and not for specific events. But all 6 members were supportive. This is a returning applicant. The request is currently consistent with current policies and historical approach, and it does meet statutory requirements. So the chairman's recommendation was to approve $62,000.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the committees and the chairman's recommendation, $62,000.
Second.
Discussion? Spencer, if you want to restate your initial comment at the beginning of this might be a really appropriate place to do this.
Since this is non-specific, it would be great to see this, these funds used to promote filling the empty restaurant space at Edens. Or at Freshfields.
I will only note for the record, based upon my very general and high-level conversations with Eden's officials, that they have been in active discussions to try to fill that space for some period of time. And there are challenges related to getting restaurateurs to locate on Kiowa Island, largely due to staffing-related issues. There may be issues regarding rents and other things. I don't know about that, but I've spoken externally to a number of different restaurateurs to try to encourage them to come to Kiowa. All love the idea, all say staffing is the biggest issue.
And that's the cost of doing business when you run restaurants, and they bought Edens, or they bought Freshfields eyes wide open.
Yep.
And so I think that there'd be a great draw to Kiowa if there was another restaurant option down here.
Mr. Chairman, I would only note that I would distinguish, while I will, again, as I did with the other ones, for general marketing purposes, support that it is with the same reservation. I would distinguish this from the 2 other Edens request.
Yes.
And I would express the same reservations I did as with regard to Acres Ellis, ESPM, and Andel Inn with regard to this one.
And Given your kind approach, I will offer again. Would you like to offer a different number for these guys?
I didn't do kind of the math on this one that I did on
Okay.
the others, and I did not make any adjustment to the ESPM or propose any adjustment to ESPM or Akers Ellis. I would not be averse to a reduction, but I'm not going to make that motion myself.
I don't know that we need to reduce it. And I don't think that we could probably put a statement in that'd be nice for them to use this to promote filling that restaurant, but since it's a general request, but I don't feel a need to change the number.
Well, the only problem with that is that would not be consistent with statutory requirements for them to do that. So I don't think we can put that in for them to spend this recruiting restaurateurs.
True.
If you're okay with that, then we'll move forward to vote. All in favor of approving Freshfields Village project number 3 for $62,000?
Aye.
Aye. So approved. Next one is Heal with Hearts. Request is for $8,000. This is Low Country Festivus Arts and Cultural Series. It's one event, it's a workshop on Kiowa to educate and promote the Low Country, Gullah, and Geechee history and related art and culture. This received just 3 of 6 votes. It's a recommended award, based on the math, came to a little over $800 versus a request of $8,000. The chairman's comments were, this is a nonprofit entity with good cultural significance, but with a weak program clarity and output, and only one of 2 events they apparently hold or want to hold on Kiowa. It's unclear as to the effect on tourism and the use of funds. It only received 3 out of 6 votes, so it was not a majority. This is a new applicant and is marginally consistent with current and future policies. The chairman's recommendation, it was a weak approval, but to give them $500 based on content and the nonprofit status. But in the chairman's view, would need much better project and event clarity in the future and impact on tourism in the future as well.
I will start with the motion, Mr. Chairman, to accept the committee's recommended award of $833.
Second?
Discussion?
I would perhaps respectfully disagree on this one, Mr. Chairman, as I actually, whether one wants to support this particular program or not is a legitimate matter, as a legitimate policy matter, but I do think this pretty clearly fits the statutory criteria of promotion of arts and cultural events. And it doesn't have to, again, be specifically tied to whether it attracts tourists or not, because that's not the requirement under the statute. And more broadly speaking, I think, having anybody that's visiting have the opportunities to participate in these kinds of programs, learn more about our culture and history here in the Low Country. I'm supportive of this. I would actually support a larger funding request. I would not put this in the same category as Little League, Berry Island Little League, for example. I actually think this does fit. Whether because they do some activities off island, whether someone else, I don't have that view, but if someone else says we don't want to fund things that aren't specifically on Kiowa, I respect that view. That's not my view, but this is one I would actually support and would have supported at a higher amount.
Well, let me just restate that again, because this is important, is that it does meet the criteria of promotion of arts and cultural events, full stop. So you don't have to have any tourist effect at all if that's what this is doing. So this, actually, the chairman now changes his recommendation to a strong approval. And we can talk about money if you would like to talk about increasing the amount, but it does clearly meet the statutory requirements and is of something that's quite interesting. We did one personal anecdote. We did one at one of the farms up in Mount Pleasant. I forget what it was, and it was incredibly interesting to learn some of the history of the Geechee and Gullah. We focused on language, and that was very, very interesting and fun, quite frankly. So the chairman would change his to a strong approval for this.
So my thinking is along the lines of where you both were going. I don't know what it costs to promote a single event at Kiowa. $8,000 might be the number. And I would be reluctant to underfund and then have them not be able to afford to have the Kiowa event because we did not support their full funding request. I tend to be in favor of the full funding amount, having to assume that that covers the expense of hosting the Kiowa event.
Is that for both events or
That's what I'm looking for.
for one event?
And like you both said, I do think we need to promote events like this that bring out the culture and heritage of the local area.
So there, the request is for $8,000. The total project is $25,000, and they got 12, or at the time of the meeting, they had 12 in place. So they needed another 13, but they only asked for 8.
Mr. Chairman, if I could amend my motion
Yes, sir.
to approve the original application request of up to $8,000 on a reimbursement basis to cover the cost for the program on Kiowa Island.
I second that.
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Any more discussion on the original ordinance or motion? All in favor of the original motion?
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
So, Healing Hearts is approved. Heal with Hearts is approved up to $8,000.
For the
Kiowa site.
Mr. Chairman, why do you think this only received 3 out of 6 votes from the committee? Any idea? I mean, if you don't know, that's fine.
My
I just
memory's
was
usually pretty
curious.
good.
I don't recall the specific one, but I recall some of the other comments, generic comments. The view of the committee members has been, is it directly related to attracting tourists? That has been the mindset of the committee members of the state tax committee. And I get that, given the composition of that committee. My guess is I don't know, the 3 of the 6 may have been, there were a couple of, the statute requires that 2 members be from the arts and cultural community, 2 be from the hospitality, and 2 be from accommodations. And it may be that the arts folks supported this and the other ones did
Yeah,
not.
no, I just was curious. I mean, it could very well just be that this is really a function once you're here, but it's not attracting you to come here for it to.
And that's right.
In terms of factual.
Okay. No, I just was curious. Don't need to belabor it. If you knew.
I think you could, looking at the votes, you could generally categorize it as the folks who are more focused on tourist-related, the committee members who are more focused on tourist-related expenditures and increasing tourism voted for 0.
Got it. That makes, I can see.
Weren't thinking as much about the cultural aspect. And quite frankly, the chairman was caught up a little bit in that discussion as well.
Okay.
But those are the ones who were less enthusiastic and didn't vote for it.
Okay.
Okay. Keeper of Wildlife Rescue Sanctuary. The applicant requested a little over $5,000. Executive summary. This is an organization located in Walterboro. This organization provides much-needed support of injured or displaced animals and rescues and renourishes animals in need. The funding request is for 4 specific items: incubators for baby possums, squirrels, ... 2 animal coops, wood for cages, and animal transport carriers. This received 5 out of 6 votes from the committee for an amount of about $4,000 versus a request of 5. The chairman's comments were, this is a very worthy cause, it's a commendable mission, but the support of tourism and other criteria to qualify for state tax funds appears to be very tangential. And while there may be rescues on Kiowa, the rescues associated funds are predominantly for use in Walterboro, other than the animal transport carriers, and too far out of the geographic area for consideration. This applicant's a very good candidate for Kiowa charitable contributions, but it didn't seem to meet the statutory requirements, and any allocation was not suggested. So the chairman's recommendation was to decline this, while being an incredibly great organization and nice people.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the chairman's recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion on this request?
Again, this is one where I just don't see how this fits it within the statutory, however otherwise worthy it might be, how it fits within the statutory criteria. I just don't find any basis to approve this, find this as legally permitted expenditure. And you say it's a good candidate for charitable contributions. I would simply note it would not be under our current criteria for our charitable program. Unless we want to reevaluate those, we might need, and we may want to do that, but it wouldn't even be a candidate under our current criteria. This is one also, again, you and I have discussed this previously. I don't think there is no statutory prohibition on expenditures off island. It just have to be primarily in the geographic area. And it's a policy matter of kind of how far, how much, et cetera. And this is one that even then starts to get a little bit further afield.
Agree.
So,
Do we have a motion?
yes. Was there a second?
Yes, it was a second. So the motion is to decline this request for Keepers of the Wildlife Rescue Sanctuary. All in favor of declining?
Aye.
Aye. Or the motion passed, the funding is declined. Kiowa Conservancy, this has one of two requests. And just to put those in perspective, this request, it's for a symposium for $10,000. The other request is repair riverfront erosion for $340,000. So they're very different requests. So this one for $10,000 is an executive summary is Beneath the Oaks with Rebecca McMacken, if I pronounce that correctly. It's a one-day environmental and cultural symposium designed to inspire and educate on how to build resilient landscapes in coastal communities. Topics will include living shorelines, native landscaping, gullah and geechee landscape knowledge, marsh and pond buffering best practices. This received 4 out of 6 votes from the committee. The committee suggested a $5,000 versus a $10,000 request. And the chairman's comments were, this is a nonprofit entity, well-respected organization with solid environmental program, well-known on Kiowa, but it's unclear whether this meets the statutory requirements for funding based on content, objectives, and tourist draw. The applicant's guess was it might generate 100 tourists and 50 locals. It is an event, and it will be held local on the island. Those were positives. The chairman's recommendation was to decline due to lack of clarity on meeting and the questionable statutory requirement meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I would move on this one approval of the committee's recommended award, $5,000.
Second.
Discussion?
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chairman, and the materials you provided to us. Struggle with this one a little bit, but it's $5,000. It was originally requested $10,000. Again, I want to make clear that similar to the Low Country Festivus, the Gullah History Program, cultural, it doesn't have to be, we can specify a policy, which we haven't done heretofore, of a program attracting tourists, but that is not a statutory requirement. It's a promotion of cultural events. And this, I think, fits within that category. The lack of clarity on the meeting requirements, I kind of recognize, appreciate that. We haven't demanded, maybe we should going forward, of either the Heal with Hearts program or, quite frankly, some of the other requests from the accommodations providers, real clarity on where the dollars are going as well. So I wouldn't oppose that requirement uniquely on this applicant relative to others.
My only question is, does $5,000 help, or are they at a point where they can't have the event because they didn't get the full funding request?
You might want to, put the applicant is here, you might want to pose that question.
We certainly need full 10,000 because we're counting on it to put the program on. The speaker, it is a national speaker. People will be coming from afar to hear the speaker. We anticipate as many as the Sandcastle Bowl, which is 180 people. Again, we feel like at least 100, 120 off island, 50 on island folks will be attending. The other cultural programs will be bringing speakers from into Kiowa. They're bringing overnight accommodations. It is bringing tourists to the island, so I think it does meet in that respect. But these dollars are definitely needed to put this program on.
That was I anticipated that was the answer.
Yeah, and maybe to push back a little bit on that, this is a program that was being developed independent of a SATAX request. So you were anticipated being able to cover the cost of this in some other fashion. So I'm not persuaded that necessarily all of the costs need to come from the SATAX application, since this was intended to be put on in any event.
So,
The total budget is 26,000. We are reaching out for other funds to make up the 16,000. So the 10,000 is what we had hoped the town would put in since it was being brought. And it's a one-time event on Kiowa. This Beneath the Oaks program was in downtown Charleston last year. It's here, and it will go somewhere else probably next year.
So for committee members, do you think of this as attracting tourism? Is that how this qualifies in your minds?
I mean, it does do
I
that.
mean, this is a promotion of arts and cultural events.
That's where I more see it.
Whether or not, again, there are some, we can, as a matter of policy, go beyond the statutory requirements, and that as many other communities do, and impose more rigorous standards across the board, whether for-profit or nonprofit, and maybe we want to go down that path. We just haven't heretofore, and it's not a statutory requirement that it actually attracts tourists, although in contrast to some others, it's at least represented that this would attract some tourism.
So, so I'm going to, again, push back on this. So if you're saying that, if your focus on this is attracting tourists,
I'm not.
if you are, it
okay.
meets the statutory
Yeah.
requirements. The way I read this is, I'm not convinced that this would be an arts and cultural event. And let me read this to you. It feels like to me, and I apologize to anybody who has any writing in this, but Beneath the Oaks with Rebecca McMacken is a one-day environmental and cultural symposium designed to inspire and educate residents and visitors about how to build resilient landscapes and coastal communities. Hosted under the majestic Oaks in Kiowa, the event will draw 180 attendees from across South Carolina. The program features internationally recognized horticulturist and urban ecologist Rebecca McMacken, known for transforming the Brooklyn Bridge, celebrated model of ecological landscape. She has compelling work featured in the New York Times, the Atlantic, Smithsonian. Her presence is expected to attract guests throughout the Southeast interested in ecological design and sustainability. The topics will include living shorelines at Mingo Point, native plant landscapings at Night Heron Park, marsh edge and pond buffering best practices, and natural pest and rodent control strategies. I left out one phrase. To me, none of that speaks to environmental, but none of it speaks to cultural. So that was my struggle with this, and I think exactly the struggle with other people. The phrase that I left out was people interested in indigenous and Gullah Geechee landscape knowledge. Everything else in this long paragraph sounds like a great environmental steward and promoter, sponsor.
My interpretation.
Felt like there was one thing thrown in there for,
And that's certainly a very reasonable position based upon that description.
My perspective on that is the environment is part of one of our cultural pillars, and it's innate to the culture of Kiowa, and we promote it in a lot of ways. Interpretation.
Okay. I mean, I take that point of view too.
I mean, the low country culture is a lot of things, but certainly acknowledging and recognizing the importance of our native landscape and wildlife is part and parcel of that.
I think if I were to err, as we're getting our arms around how this will go forward, I would err towards the full funding request.
I was thinking, again, my role was thinking strictly, and this, for me, it just didn't meet a strict reading of the regulatory stance. But if you want to define Kiowa's culture as living with nature and environmental stewardship, then I'm okay with that too.
But don't forget, she says in her write-up that it's going to be attracting 180 attendees.
Yeah, we
So
took-
that's,
The mayor took tourists off the table, which was okay. I would put tourists back on the
No,
table.
I mean, you could
Yeah.
base it on either or both. I was just simply saying that, making the point that we're trying to do calculate, I just not get into the box of, okay, this one is the number of tourists being attracted sufficient? Because we haven't gone down that path with others. That's the only point I was making there.
Tourism is a nice upside in my mind.
Okay, so I think I heard an amendment
There
to
is
the
a motion on the table for approval of the committee's recommendation of $5,000.
I move we amend to approve the applicant request of $10,000.
Second.
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment passes. All in favor of the request for $10,000 for the Conservancy's request for Rebecca Mackin?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's approved at $10,000. Okay, Conservancy number 2, this applicant's request is $340,000. Executive summary is to control and repair riverfront erosion along 370 feet of tidal marsh perpendicular to Kiowa River Bridge using nature-based solutions such as manufactured wire reefs and marsh grass plantings. This is for a 2-year project that has 3 phases or areas for repair. And if you need to see the picture is in their original materials. And I have it here too, if somebody wants to see it. This received 5 out of 6 votes. The recommended award was $118,000 versus the $340,000 request. Chairman's comments. There was concern among the committee for the 2-year funding request, thinking that we should only fund for 1 year, and to the extent of the improvement as one moves further away from the bridge. The chairman has the same concern the chairman had the same concerns. While erosion control is specifically included in the statutory guidelines, the clear implication is for land edge erosion and not for river marsh erosion. There is part of the project that can reasonably be included as bridge protection or land edge erosion, but part of the project, especially the westernmost part, in purple if you look at a diagram, would seem to fall outside the statutory definition for SATEX funds use. So the chairman's recommendation is to approve for the bridge adjacent phases at $110,000 versus the recommendation from the committee at $118,000. And just let me read from the statute. What's approved is control and repair of waterfront erosion, including beach renourishment. And the chairman interprets waterfront erosion as land edge erosion, not river marsh erosion. So, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, question
Yes.
before offering a motion, or certainly my fellow committee member can offer a motion. What's the thinking in the 110 versus the committee's recommendation? That was a little more than a round up or round down.
think it should have been for 118. That might be a typo. I'm happy to make that change. It was basically to follow the committee. It was not intended to round down by $8,000, so I'm thinking that's a typo by the chairman.
And I would move a recommendation of approval at $118,000.
Second.
Discussion.
So I would certainly welcome the applicant who's in the room, discussion around this. I've indicated that I'm very supportive of this project as part of our overall marsh management strategy, the health and resiliency of the Kiowa River and our estuarine system around Kiowa Island. Having said that, I believe that the chairman makes a good point about kind of what the scope of the control and repair of waterfront erosion language is in the statute. I think one could make a very strong case that anything impacting the main point of ingress and egress to the island and all its tourist facilities, the bridge itself, and some certain distance around that would seem to clearly fit within the statutory criteria. The further away you get, perhaps the less so. Doesn't mean that I don't think those would be an appropriate use of public monies, and maybe the applicant needs to look at applying from other sources from the town. But I could certainly understand the chairman's point about whether, in fact, that once you get further afield, whether that really fits within the statutory criteria.
Well, I just wanted to throw out for you guys that this is a 2-year job, so the applicant can come back next year for the balance? Is that something you would entertain?
They can. One of the, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, one of the points that they made was part of this is in building the boxes, the wire mesh boxes, and you wanted to do that all up front. So there was some front loading of costs, and they had the volunteers set up, and they weren't sure they could build half and then have the volunteers come back and build the other half, I think was part of the explanation. Is that fair?
That's correct. And to the point of the 118, that is not even paying for the first phase. The first phase is, which would be year one, which is the front loading issue to get these built, is $162,000. If we can't get those dollars, that's beyond what we can do.
And remind me, apart from phase 1 and phase 2, is phase 1 just the geographic area immediately that's basically involves town approval, KICA approval? Yeah, I can't.
Phase one is the green.
Yeah, phase 1's the green, phase 2 is the red, phase 3 is the purple.
So phase 2 would also be required for the bridge?
Yep.
Correct.
And that was part of the recommendation. What I don't remember was, were there any wire boxes required for phase 3? Or was
Yes.
that all marsh grass?
That would primarily be the manufactured wire wreaths. Manufactured wire wreaths would be needed for all the phases. The majority of the planting would be done in phase 1.
So I think to the chairman's point with, again, as much as I'm supportive of the project, I think phase 3 is more challenging to fit in to the statutory criteria. And phase 3 is, the not majority, but a plurality of the manufactured wire reefs, as well as, from a linear feet standpoint. So we need to better understand what the true costs are, because you need to look for another funding source for all of what would constitute phase 3. We need to focus on phase 1 and phase 2 and how much the actual cost is associated with phase one and phase two, and then, what is necessary to get phase one done, and then you can come back with phase two, understanding that there are probably a majority of those phase one and phase two costs that might need to be in the first iteration. Does that all
So-
make sense?
I think it does, and I think it's along the lines of what, if I understand you correctly, how I was thinking that perhaps defer this one and ask for a revised project plan that encompasses what we think is reasonably within scope of the statutory and our understanding of this, that allows a project to continue, but it would have to, be based off of revised costs.
So I would just mention that phase one and phase two would be $211,000. As currently proposed, some of those costs for materials would decrease, but and some of the costs for labor, but the labor to build the manufactured wire wreaths is very minimal because it's primarily volunteer based. So we would have a slight reduction in construction costs, the actual materials, the wire and the rebar, but it's not a significant amount of reduction because the labor costs are mostly volunteer and in-kind donations.
Well, given that, John, that doesn't make sense to me then, because it looks like you've got a total of 800 manufactured wired reefs and 600 some. So just a little bit of majority of the hard cost would be associated with phase one and phase two. And if there's no difference in labor cost, because that's generally free, most of your hard cost would be, it can't be more than, it shouldn't be, a little bit more than a majority associated phase one and phase two.
Yeah, there are significant upfront costs to buy all the tools, to set up the facility to be able to bill all of them. I have a detailed breakdown of all the costs associated with it. I could get that within a day, probably, the difference that it would be to remove phase three. But $118,000 would not be able to complete the project, even phase one or phase two.
We don't necessarily look to complete the project.
What-
We're not, yeah.
What
Once
I
we
think,
start the project, we have the committed,
the overall project cost, the overall request for the project was $340,000. We should, for purposes of this, take out everything associated with phase three, which is about 40% of the hard cost associated with the manufactured wired wreaths, the wiring, the rebar, et cetera. So you're backing out that, and that's going to be some number significantly, not majority, but significantly less than the 340. And then let's focus on, out of that lower number, let's just say it's $250,000. What amount is necessary in order to really get us from, through phase one, and you can come back on phase two? So I'm thinking, maybe it's $150,000 or $175,000 or something. I don't know, but that's kind of what or the range we're looking at.
That's kind of what's in my head, no higher than 200. I'm not tracking in the budget table where the 340 came from. I'm seeing 275 in subtotal direct costs. I'm seeing,
so it's 275 for the total direct costs. We put in a contingency for increased labor. If we don't get enough volunteers to help, we'll have to pay for more labor. Design and permitting for engineer firms if necessary, which we currently do not believe that's necessary. And then transportation equipment if we can't get that donated. So that $65,000 is a contingency. So the actual cost to complete the project we believe would be $275. We wanted some wiggle room so we didn't start the process and then not be able to complete it for unforeseen.
There's no point in starting it if your goal is not to complete it.
that makes sense.
Just why do it?
And more,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Well, your budget narrative indicates for phase one, it's $153,599, and Phase 2 is 24,500. Is that an accurate estimate for those two phases?
There might have been a slight change from the proposal that I sent in, the full 29-page proposal, and then what's in that, the SATEX one. But this is our best estimate. Everything changes based on labor and volunteers. So those are pretty fair, good estimates, we think.
And I respect the complexity of trying to figure this out
never done
with all
this.
the moving parts.
Nobody's really done this before. SCD&R is the expert in this, and they're working on projects in Paris Island with the price tag, $2 million. So we think that we're adding significant value with the volunteers, our staff time. Low Country Land Trust is providing their staff time. So yes, it's some of this is going to need some wiggle room, but these are our best estimates.
So at the risk of more math in public, we're roughly looking at 60% of 275 plus non-severable costs that can't be upfront costs so somewhere in the number range you were.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, based on the budget narrative, what I would do at this juncture is recommend approval at the $160,000 level, which is what's represented the budget narrative as the cost associated with Phase 1.
Well, it should be both for just Phase 1.
Yeah, and that's a slight cushion to some contingencies.
And we can adjust where we actually install it, the phase. That was the suggestion based on all three phases. But if we want to focus primarily right around both sides of the bridge, the coloration of the lines, we can change where we install.
And I'll share as an aside that contributes to this. In a separate discussion track we've started again is the wake on the river.
Yes.
And we're going to bring you in on that discussion once we kind of get our thought process going. But, we are mindful of that and trying to find ways to tackle that as well. Just offer an amendment.
I offered a motion because we had
Oh,
not
right.
yet had a motion. So I now moved that we approve the request at $160,000 for Phase 1, and they can come back with the remainder amount subsequently.
Second.
Discussion? So just one comment, and I know this is kind of a bit in the past, but you got several engineers up here on the deck up here, and.
Sorry.
I don't know if you've done the calculation, but your contingency is about 23%, 24%. From an engineering standpoint, that probably makes me shudder. Contingency is usually in the order of 5 to 10%.
5 to 10.
Not 23%. So I would
Well,
go back to doing, excuse me. I
It
would
doesn't
just-
include any contingency, right? What I've been proving is excluding all contingency.
So in the future, as you bring projects to us, you need to tighten up your costs and have your contingencies less. Get your costs in a better line so you know better. I know that it's difficult, especially when dealing with volunteers. You're going to get big pushback from engineers when you show a contingency of 23, 24%.
Okay.
Just food for thought. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion is approved at $160,000 for Kiowa Conservancy Part 2.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome. And again, as you're leaving, please note that I think I think I speak for everybody saying this is a great project. It's just the scope of it is the issue, and how we have to spend these monies, when you go outside the scope, you understand.
And we will tighten it up. Thank you for your recommendation. Now we know. And we will do hopefully, bring you better projects that will even meet your needs even more so.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Key Island Golf Resort. The applicant's request was $475,000. Executive summary. This is marketing of Key Island events and holiday programming. This is a for-profit entity. It has specific event with 4 major attractions throughout the year, including but not limited to holiday activities and programming, summer programming, environmental outreach and education, and sporting events, which includes running and swimming events. There is robust budgeting and accounting process for marketing and advertising for these 4 events in both print and soft media. The applicants, or the committee voted 6 out of 6 for this to recommend it. They recommended the full award. The chairman's comments are, this is a for-profit entity, but it does have a robust marketing program with specific events that have clear, positive, and measurable impact on tourism across multiple activity types, and provides enticements from the events, the activities, and lodging for both short and long-term visitors. So the chairman's recommendation was to approve this in full as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the chairman's and committee's recommendation for the $475,000.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, I'm not voting, but I would vote in approval of this myself, and I'm just looking for the future. How do you square this up for going forward if it's a for-profit? What are we going to do?
So my only reservation, my comment would be, my reservations expressed about others with regard to for-profit, but I would also distinguish, I had additional reservations with regard to some of the others, because not only they're for-profit, not kind of specific with regard to any events, it was just general marketing, et cetera, very loosely tied to facilitation or attraction. Putting aside the for-profit, which is a legitimate issue we've got to deal with, in every other respect, the Kiawah Island Golf Resort meets the statutory.
Oh, 100%,
regulation.
as I already
Yeah,
said, I'd
yeah,
vote,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
100% in favor of this expenditure, but I'm asking, what are we doing next year?
So, well, and we've got to, again, we've got as a matter of policy, whether we're supportive of for-profit allocations, I'd like to get an opinion of council ultimately on kind of where you draw the line between, on whether it is there's a public purpose and incidental private benefit that would justify the expenditure of public funds. I think you can probably make the case here. Going forward, my inclination would maybe to have the monies more closely tied to events that they do, like the marathon, you know, the golf tournaments.
All right, so the bottom line is, we don't know, and you're going to get council input, and that's fine. I just was, I
But
wanted to know where this is going. Okay, that's fine.
So, a couple comments in a couple different directions. So, yeah, I think that, first and foremost, I think you can clearly say, as I think we all have, that the resort attracts tourists.
Absolutely.
And they work to growing our tourist base too, and improving the amenities like they're doing at the tennis center. So they're reinvesting in their business. So I think that's clear. The clear negative is they're for profit. So anything that we do that would add monies to their projects or reduce their project costs improves their profitability. The other thing that I think about is we are also going down the path of, again, using SATEX money to restore the beach down near the ocean course, which in part is to restore natural habitat, but in part it protects their driving range. And so we have to think about how much money that they're getting and whether that means anything or not. If it's, again, for all these purposes, would we do this anyway? And so I think about this, I don't have mixed feelings. I think we should approve this in full. But there are a lot of implications because it's a for-profit entity that makes you think about things. And I think there's ways around it where if they were creative, they could do this. Again, specific events and ring circling those costs makes it a lot easier. But it's not without a lot of thought that the chairman approved this in full.
Okay, thank you.
And we're looking at $300,000 or so for the beach renourishment, Mr. Mayor? Or is it 3 to 5?
No, it was probably more than that, given what was initially projected. I think we'd proved 75,000 or so for initial permitting-related expenditures. But whether, in fact, the project ends up being necessary at all in the near term, or whether it needs to be the same scope, given dynamic changes that have occurred subsequent to the initial proposal of this project, remains to be seen.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of funding Kiowa Island Golf Resort at $175,000?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Funded. Low Country Land Trust. Oh, here we go. The applicant's request is for $1 million. The executive summary is Angel Oak Preserve. This is, the monies are for the design and build of a 44-acre passive preserve to expand the existing Angel Oak Park, including a building, a welcome center, restrooms, outdoor classrooms, boardwalk, and over 2 miles of leisure trails. Currently, as budgeted, this will be a $12.5 million build, and a total of $5.2 million has been raised to date. This received 3 out of 6 votes from the committee. The recommended award versus $1 million request was $43,000 and change. Chairman's comments is, this is going to be an upgrade and enhancement to Angel Oak Park and to that area of Johns Island. However, this does not seem to fit the statutory requirements for funding. It will not enhance the tourist experience until complete, and is not contiguous or in the near area of Kiowa, as the chairman defines it, and is development and construction financing. This seems better suited to secure funds from the Conservancy, the town charitable contributions, or other entities. And the chairman's recommendation is decline. No funding based on lack of statutory fit, lack of tourist impact in the near term, and lack of relative proximity. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I am going to go a slightly different direction on this one and recommend approval at the $50,000 level, which is modestly more than the simple average of the committee's recommended award of $43,000.
Second.
Discussion?
I just want to point out to you guys, I just did a tally. I think if we have total available funds of 1,448,000. No, what's the 1.5? Okay, so there were somewhere around 300,000 remaining to be allocated. I just wanted you guys to.
I'm glad you did that. I was going to ask what our spend to budget was so far.
Well, I was gonna let you guys go through it without having that, and then at the end, I was gonna tell you if you were over. or
Yeah,
under.
and then we
Because
can
I don't
do,
want
then
you
we
to-
can do
I
a
don't
pro
want you
rata
to
or,
Bias your decision
yeah,
because
yeah,
you think you're out of
yeah.
line.
Because we could always do a pro rata adjustment.
Although a
It's
couple
not
of these,
gonna
we
matter.
don't want to pro rata, as we
The other thing-
previously discussed.
Yeah, I probably don't want to do pro rata. The other thing, we can have a second round like we did last year and fund it in the fall. So we can have applicants come back.
Although a pro rata would be, I suspect, pretty modest. I don't think we're going to be, but we can do it either way. So, Mr. Chairman, in interest of full disclosure, I encouraged this applicant, Low Country Land Trust, to apply for tax funds.
And I was aware of that.
I respectfully, very strongly disagree that this doesn't meet the statutory criteria. In fact, I think this is squarely as any project could, meets the statutory criteria, both because it is a tourist attraction, attracts 400,000 visitors a year, at least according to their own numbers. It is the funds used for the construction, maintenance, and operation of facilities for civic and cultural activities. That would certainly be this. So I think, again, it's a slam dunk as to whether it meets the statutory criteria. Having said that, two things. One, there is not a statutory requirement that it be close to Kiowa. But having said that, as a policy matter, and you and I have had this conversation,
Yes.
I certainly respect one's view, yours or anyone else's, that they might think this is a little bit further afield than we want to support. I personally don't agree with this. I think that it's 7 or 8 miles, and it's the first kind of major tourist attraction you see on the way to Kiowa, and Kiowa families do go to the Angel Oak. And this is a extraordinarily iconic area of the Low Country and Johns Island. But I can understand where one said, I just want to draw certain lines, and that's fine. But I would distinguish between that as a policy matter and what the statutory criteria permit. I would express some frustration with the Low Country Land Trust application in a couple of respects. One, that it was a much larger number, much larger number than I'd ever anticipated. And two, I think it's incumbent upon that the Low Country Land Trust to also pursue, say, tax funding from Charleston County as well as Charleston City, since I don't know, it's probably in a little of both, or is it entirely in Charleston City now?
Well, the tree, I think, is entirely within the city. I'm not sure about the.
It's because it's really close around there as to where the city and. But having said that, in terms of our state tax allocations and a contribution, a modest contribution to a project which I think enhances the overall visitor experience for anybody coming to Kiowa Island, I'm supportive of providing some level of funding.
And I tend to agree with that. I don't think it's that far away from my perspective. We go up there to Maybank for dinner all the time, and I think probably more and more people are starting to do that as that's being developed out. So, I do think that it is a draw. The question is how big of a draw, but, I do think that it's a legitimate activity.
I think I sent to you one time that it actually is shown up in the resorts marketing materials as one of the things you can do while you're here.
We've taken visitors there.
Okay, this is one where we're going to agree to disagree,
no.
and I think we all know that. I do think that, again, as I look at the statute, it says, provide, tourist-related expenditures include advertising and promotion of tourism so as to develop and increase tourist attendance through the generation of publicity. So I think it very marginally that the publicity around Angel Oak might marginally contribute to tourist attendance on Kiowa versus other places. I think of it as something that people might do, but I don't think of it as something that's advertising and promotion of tourism and developing an increase. I just have, it just doesn't seem to fit for me from, it's being a tourist attraction that gets people to come and stay at Kiowa. It's sort of like your argument earlier around Andel Inn. Sure, people stay there, but is that attracting tourists to Kiowa? Sure, people visit Angel Oak, but is that attracting people to stay at Kiowa? It's sort of that same logic for me.
I mean, certainly in my view, it's part of the experience with one comes to visit Kiowa. And particularly if you're interested in the Low Country, the environment, families, my guess is many families do take advantage of, they're here for a week. They go over to Wadmalaw, the rice plantation, the tea plantation, or whatever, the tea plantation, they'll go to Angel Oak. That's part of the overall Kiowa, as well as just Charleston experience. It's also people that stay in Charleston do the same thing. But it is a major tourist attraction in and of itself that's very close by. But wholly apart from its tourist attraction elements, again, it seems to me it fits within number 3. It fits within number 8.
3 is cultural or
Construction, maintenance, and operation of facilities for culture, civic and cultural activity, including construction and maintenance of nearby roads. And it is a tourist attraction, and this is the facilities, enhancing the facilities, including the roads leading to it. So just like we would do with our Civic and Cultural Center wing and any roads expenditures. Now, admittedly, it is not in Kiowa. Absolutely,
And that's
I
the
have
second
no-
part of my-
I have no issue with, your view as a policy matter, that you would rather expend those monies closer to home. No issue with that whatsoever. I believe it does fit squarely within the statutory criteria.
And again, that's, and we can agree to disagree, that's define your outreach. I think we agreed earlier that Walterboro was
Yep.
too far afield.
Yep.
So now we agree that that's appropriate to think it like that.
Yes.
Now it's just where do we draw the line?
Yeah, and absolutely, and I don't, and.
And so for me, at this point in time, we haven't gone that far. That's a big jump. If we went to River Road, that might be appropriate. In my way of thinking right now is we're growing outwardly, but to make that jump all the way to Angel Oak, and again, it's something that people do once they get here, but I don't see it as people coming and staying in Kiowa because they want to go see Angel Oak. They come here and they ride by and they see Angel Oak, oh yeah, what is that? And they advertise it. That's something they do. It's an activity rather than something that is an attraction, if you will.
But it's all part of the Kiowa experience, like going to see the strand feeding dolphins, going into Charleston. I mean, a lot of people come to Kiowa because we moved to Kiowa because of its proximity to Charleston, not just because
Okay.
of Kiowa.
So,
Yeah.
right there.
But you're
Wait,
right.
let me
Yeah,
answer
I
the
know where
question.
you're
So let me
going.
answer
I know
your
where you're
question.
going.
So if the Southeastern Wildlife Seaweed
Yep.
Exposition came to us and said, hey, we're an attraction.
Yep.
We're in Charleston, can we get funding? Quite frankly, I would say that's one that attracts people to come to Kiowa. They're coming for that, but coming to Kiowa, but it's in Charleston. So it would fit in its attraction, but for me, that's too far afield, and they should ask Charleston first.
And I wouldn't disagree with that, and Walterboro's too far. So literally, we're just drawing slightly different lines. For me, kind of Lower Johns Island, and this one fits within kind of the geographic proximity I'm comfortable with. I understand and respect a contrary view in that regard.
Thank you. Okay, we've sort of worn that out. Anything else from you, Mr. Spencer?
I'm fine with it.
So we have a motion in front of us to approve the Angel Oak funding at $50,000. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Motion passes. Lost my way. Oh, no, it doesn't. The last one is Low Country Marine Mammal Network.
Second to
Request
last.
for, I'm sorry?
Second to last.
Oh, thank you. Second to last, Low Country Marine Mammal Network, application request is for just under $26,000. Executive summary, this is enhancing the dolphin experience on Kiowa Island, a proposed year-long tourist-focused initiative to enhance and expand marine mammal education, outreach, and awareness through a youth education program, guided dolphin walks, and a marketing campaign, all with specific goals and objectives. And there are 3 or 4 objectives for each. The funds will be used for marketing, signage, program materials and supplies, some travel and training. This received 5 out of 6 votes from the committee. Recommended award was just under $17,000 versus a request of just under $26,000. The chairman's comments were a unique and growing eco-tourist activity, unique to Kiowa. This should continue to provide, and I want to say Kiowa, I guess I should say Seabrook and Kiowa. This should continue to provide a diverse activity appealing to a different type of tourist and broaden family activities. So the chairman's recommendation is to approve $17,000. Slightly over,
Chairman, I
slightly
move
over the record.
approval of the chairman's recommendation.
Second. I've just got a
Discussion.
different number in my head. I agree. I think this one's a slam dunk. It's fitting a lot of the criteria. I don't know why we would shortchange this one, because we've used this as an example in some of the other discussions of a draw and attraction for Kiowa. So I would think we'd want to support the full $25,850.
So full disclosure, I actually solicited them to apply a long time ago, and I was in a recent video about strand feeding. And so this is, I think, it's an incredible experience that is unique to Kiowa. So you may not, if you want to see this, you have to come to Kiowa. It may not be a big attraction, but it's something that we should, for other reasons, we should better manage. But I think it does fit squarely with whether it's cultural, whether it's tourist attraction. I think it fits very well.
If there is consensus, I'm happy to modify my motion. Sure. Mr. Chairman, I would modify my motion to actually approve the applicant's requested amount of $25,850.
Second.
Any discussion on that?
I think you have the cushion to do that, just so you know.
All in favor of the amendment to the motion?
Actually, I just revised my motion, so it wasn't an amended motion. I just revised.
Okay, you revised your motion.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. So Low Country Marine Mammal Network is approved at $25,850.
Before we get to the next one, and it's to a motion, where are we? Because there's maybe a little difference in dollars here that,
If you're talking about for St. John Fire
Yeah.
Department, you would have enough if you were to fully fund their.
okay, all right.
And I would, as we think about this, I would prefer we not pro rata anything else. I would rather, because we spend a lot of time discussing how much money, you have money to allocate in the fall. Okay, last one. St. John's Fire District, the applicant requests $110,060. The executive summary, this is advanced medical support. The funding will support the increased level of emergency response and care, covering 50% of the cost of a paramedic specialist and additional continuing education. And if I can editorialize, if I recall from the discussion, they had already paid this last year, and so we were making sure that they didn't have to pay this extra again this year. So it's completing the cost of that additional paramedic specialist. This received 6 out of 6 votes. The recommended award was just under $82,000. The chairman's comments is, this is a nonprofit organization meeting the needs of a growing island and supports tourism with greater coverage, better experienced people, and the potential for improved response times. And the chairman's recommendation was, and I think this was supposed to be $110,000 fully funding. So that's what I'm going to make it be.
Before offering a motion, a question, and I don't recall from the materials, and I don't have them in front of me. This would fit under the statutory provision, which would require that be based on an estimated percent of cost directly attributable to tourist. So we've, as a municipality, this isn't a municipality, it is a governmental organization. We've applied the 70% test to that.
Okay. My understanding was they are only requesting 50% coverage, so it was below the 70%.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted
that's
to
my
get
understanding.
clarification on.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
They used the formula, but I don't remember, I know it wasn't full 100%.
Okay. In which case, the full application request would still be under the 70% formula.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay. Well, okay. If that is our collective understanding, then, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend approval at the $110,000 amount.
Second.
Any other discussion? Let's see if there's. Yeah, it's, the paramedic expense, 50% of his base salary. It's not one person, it's 3 people. It's $106,000. That's just 50, and then the training is $4,000, so 110 is 50% of their salary. Any other discussion? So all in favor of approving St. John's Fire District at $110,000?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 110 approved. That concludes all of our CTEX applications
Woo.
for the spring of 2025.
Mr. Chairman, So the amount that was allocated was 1.4 million, et cetera. So essentially, the remaining amount is $118,984 unallocated.
Okay, that's all the old business. There is no new business. Chairman's report. Again, I just want to thank this committee for the diligence you provided today and for postponing it last month until today, to allow me time to give you more information about these worthy causes. It is really nice, again, to see the breadth and the depth of applicants for these monies that we have available to them. I do commit to you to, before the end of the year and probably before a next SATEX vote by the Ways and Means, that we're going to make some progress on the approach, the philosophy that the committee uses. And there's also a desire by the committee to have a pre-approval process. So the staff and maybe the chairman pre-approve what comes before them so they don't have to decide whether it meets the criteria or not. So more work to come, and you'll see hopefully you'll see a request for an improvement to the charter of the SATEX committee. And I'll stop there.
So, Mr. Chairman, a question before we leave this, whether, and it occurs to me, that do we also need to formally, as a committee, recommend approval to the council to the additional allocations that were the town projects?
Yes, I think it would be.
Yeah.
To put that on the record, I think that would just.
Yes. So what, do we have that, that?
Yep.
Yeah.
See, the town projects totaled $1,348,779, and that's the amount that we put in for 4 applications. The CCS deputy the CCSO deputy coverage, beach patrol contract, Trident Beach trash pickup contract, and arts and cultural events program.
Okay. So going back to new business, do I have a motion to
No,
recommend?
this is still old business. We're still in old business.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a recommendation in addition to recommending to town council approval of the outside organization allocations as approved today, that we also approve the allocations to the town, the municipal projects as set forth by the town administrator in the amount of
$3,448,779.
that amount.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That amount is approved.
Thank you. Yeah, okay.
Okay, there's no, you're not going to do the budget report for the month, are you?
I have it, but it really is, Dorota did, I think, a good job. She provided the cover sheet and the cash flow sheet, but overall, our revenues were 11 months in. This report's 11 months because she has not closed out June because our new fiscal year started today. And so in terms of revenue, 11 months in, we are over by 9%, which is about 1.4 million. Our expenditures, we're over a little bit in expenditures. Some of it's timing. Some of it here is in regards to our AV came in at a higher cost, and our Charleston County deputy coverage, our budget is 21,000 over budget. It may be just slightly over, just a little bit more once she closes out June. And so that represents about 9% over our expenditure budget. We're at 92% in, but I do believe that probably by the when she closes out June, I think we will probably be higher, a little bit higher in revenue, and of course a little bit higher in expenditures.
Okay, since we're talking about this, I do have a question.
Yep.
So our revenues are up 1.357, our expenditures are up 894. The net change in fund balance, it's shown as a negative 463. The very bottom right-hand corner. This should be a negative 463 or is it a positive 463?
That I'm not sure, let me see, she has that fund, I think it should be a, well.
It may just be a nomenclature approach, but
Right, I'll have to confirm with her why she has that as a negative. Because if I take the total revenue, well then, and she's taking out the,
unless she's put it in the general fund and she's taken it out and
Right.
put it in the fund, that's,
fund, yeah.
okay.
that's interesting.
I think that's
I'll
probably
confirm with her.
maybe what it is, but, okay. Citizen comments, looks like we have none. Committee members' comments.
Mr. Chairman, I would only suggest but open to fellow council members' views on this, that for purposes of our town council meeting, that we take the committee's recommendations in aggregate.
I agree.
And approve them, and just note that we will approve the committee's recommendation, the allocation of 3 point, or whatever actually, the total allocations,
The town and the.
town, outside organization, CVB, and then we just kind of have each of those breakdowns, and then that's what we're approving.
Amen.
You're going to list them line by line, or just do it in some, just in some?
No.
Okay.
And we can simply note that there were 11 different, or however many different outside organizations that we allocated to.
I agree.
Thank you.
Nothing else? We are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.